Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kiwanal. I am the head of cybersecurity for the Stacks Foundation, and I'm joined by Alfredo Ortega from CoinFabric, one of our preferred security vendors and a fantastic hacker. So we'll go ahead and talk today about security in general and specifically about security audits. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Did it work? All right, so I'm going to play a video here, and it's essentially a 0-day on the NFT website called SuperRare. So a 0-day is something that has never been publicly disclosed. I actually found this about 11 months ago before I joined the Stacks Foundation. The 90-day grace period ended 8 months ago, and SuperRare, through their lawyer, has told me they don't feel this is necessary to fix. But the interesting part is I can use this vulnerability that I'm currently showcasing up here. I'm not going to go too deep into technical details. I can use this to steal any user's money on SuperRare. Any Ethereum, any ERC tokens, any NFTs. But before we go deep into the tech talk about stuff like this, we should probably talk about what a website even is. At an extremely high level, a website has two components. You have the pretty stuff, the cosmetic design, which is like HTML, CSS, the stuff that makes the website look nice and pretty. Then you have the functionality, the stuff that actually makes the website do something. And that's where we start getting into a little bit more interesting security topics. When we do a security review of a website, we're usually encountering a vulnerability called stored cross-site scripting, stored XSS. What that essentially means is that I'm able to inject functional code into your website and get to do whatever I really want. This is a very common vulnerability, and this one is a little fun one because it allows me to manipulate the file name and pop the vulnerability this way. So I am what is normally referred to as a white hat hacker. That is basically a good guy. So you see a couple of alert boxes with just number 1. That is what we refer to as a proof of concept. It shows that the vulnerability actually exists, but the exploit itself doesn't do any real damage. But things get really interesting if I decide to be a bad guy, which is known as a black hat hacker. There's so much more functionality I can inject in your website. For example, I can do maybe a login prompt that shows a username and password, and whatever you instinctively put in there, maybe your WordPress admin credentials or your web server credentials, I can harvest those and steal that. I could probably steal what is known as a session cookie, which is basically how you know that you're active on the website. And if I do that, I can pretend to be you. If you're the website owner, I can pretend I can give away 100% discounts on your store. I can post offensive material on your blog, and everyone thinks it's you, not me. But what's really interesting, really bad effect, is if I use the MetaMask JavaScript library and craft a malicious payload, I host it somewhere, and I'm basically able to steal everyone's money. And we consider that a problem in cybersecurity. But what is more interesting on the security perspective on this website is the website doesn't look like it was actually damaged at all. I mean, the SSL certificate is valid, functionality looks okay, it doesn't look like there's any really wonky graphics or anything like that. So from a user perspective, it doesn't really look like there's been any damage. And of course, from a developer side, it's kind of hard to find these things too. I mean, source code reviews may be able to find it, but not many people actually know what to do with the results of source code reviews. I mean, web hosting providers have security tools. There's Akamai, there's Cloudflare, but at the end of the day, those are such a complete joke, it's not even worth talking about. And so as a developer, you're never going to know I'm actually executing this attack until I tell you, like I did when I was a white hat. From a user perspective, this is also pretty interesting too, because when you interact with MetaMask, the average end user doesn't really understand technology too well. I guess that goes without saying. Like if you see a MetaMask transaction pop up, you're going to see a bunch of JSON and stuff, but your average end user doesn't know what to do with this information. They're just going to see, okay, I trust MetaMask. It pops up an alert box. I need to click accept to re-log into SuperRare or whatever, and at that point is essentially game over. And I've taken your money. I'm going to head out to a non-extradition country and go ahead and enjoy my retirement. But because we are white hats, we don't really enjoy seeing this happen. Quite frankly, the bad guys, the black hats, make our lives worse. I haven't had a Friday night off in about 4 years because people just love to take time off and start hacking things. They add so much work to me. They cost so much time and money. We just don't like black hats at the end of the day. So people like us, we engage with projects, code bases, developers on something that's called a security audit. So what that means at a very, very high level is that we pretend to be bad guys. So we sit down with the developers, whoever owns the application. We then basically try to understand how the app works as intended. So basically the way you intended it for it to be designed, whatever users you're trying to use or whatever the case may be, and we try to understand the application that way. Then we go, quote unquote, black hat and break the application as much as we possibly can. We use the same tools, the same techniques that the bad guys do, but the difference between us is we don't actually exploit anything. We actually turn around and tell you guys exactly what we were able to find. Something simple from not really having the right version number on your compiler, all the way up to something really dangerous like stealing money or remote code execution or something like that. So at the end of the day, a security audit, and the main takeaway of this talk is a security audit is partnering with security professionals to make your code as secure as possible, make exploits as minimal as possible, don't make sure your users don't have their money stolen or anything like that, and fundamentally to make the bad guys' day a little bit worse. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Mr. Ortega to go a little bit more in detail about security audits. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so why security matters? Well, it matters. It's very useful to avoid the stuff that you just saw. That's basically a zero-day attack. Zero-day attacks are the most dangerous because you cannot detect them. You cannot protect them from them. Basically, you can, with that vulnerability, you can drain your wallets, and you cannot do anything about it. The only thing you can do is to find before it happens and then fix it. But this is already happened. Mark found it, and just it is still live. The vulnerability still exists, so it's very dangerous to use that site, especially now that we told everybody. But so, well, basically, it's about decreasing risk. Now that site is very risky, so it's not very because it was not audited. But the thing that the message I want to say is that it's not only a risk for the clients, but also for the developers. If you work as a developer for a company, and an incident happens, there likely will be a police investigation, and basically you are the first suspect, especially in blockchain technology, because there are theft, there are money involved. So if you don't attend security, you don't focus on security, it will affect your life, not only the life of the clients. And if you are an owner, a business owner, of course it will affect your life, it will affect your track record. If you have a big hold, a big theft, or a big vulnerability in your site. So, and even it will affect your business because it will use your product won't pass the compliance. There are almost no compliance now in the blockchain, but it will be in the future. So probably you will be forced to do audits and like banks do.
Yeah, and developers definitely keep that in mind. I have been on both sides of these investigations. They are not pleasant processes, so definitely take security seriously because, like you said, you're going to be the first suspect. You know the code base better than anyone else. You know the vulnerabilities probably better than anyone else, so you're probably going to be suspect number one in these cases.
Yeah, not a good place to be. So it's better to look at this before it happens. So, like Mark just explained, basically you hire an ethical hacker. I don't like the word ethical. Basically, you hire an auditor, and basically it has your system before the real hacker does it. Now, the thing is, it's almost certain that a hacker will look at your system when you upload it. It's almost guaranteed, because you have automatic tools that are scanning the blockchain constantly, looking for vulnerabilities. That's why when a protocol has vulnerability, it gets exploited in like days. Because it's not even guys looking for that, it's just bots, scripts. So your project will be audited. The thing is, we will be audited by a hacker or we will do it by a company. So it's better to be audited by an ethical hacker.
And there's automated tools out there all the time. Like even I have a script that monitors new blocks for just published smart contracts that finds vulnerabilities. There's easy ways to automate exploitation of those vulnerabilities. There's also things called honeypots, which are deliberately vulnerable smart contracts that wannabe hackers can interact with that actually end up having their funds stolen that way as well. So there's plenty of automated tools out there. So definitely want to get an audit as fast as humanly possible before those automated tools find your project and start doing some real damage.
Exactly. You are not not fighting against a Korean hacker or not Korean hacker. You're fighting against a script. It's much faster. It's not human. So and lastly, when you do a security audit, you get to fix bugs. You get to find bugs and fix them in a controlled environment. I mean, when your project gets hacked, basically the whole company probably gets into a panic state. You get investigation. You don't have time to fix things. You have basically to fix your plane while you are flying. So it's very hard to do. But when in audit you have a lot of resources, you have an expert security that will help you fix things, you have plenty of time, so it's actually much better, much relaxed environment to do fixes and do fix it well, because when you fix things fast and under pressure, you likely will make more mistakes. Even sometimes you get things worse. That's also for experience. So what kind of bugs you will find in a security audit? Well, we can find plenty of bugs, not only a single class of bugs, but we are looking for everything. Especially the most important, of course, the critical bugs. I mean, the bugs that allow you to steal all the money. That is the most dangerous bug I think we look for, but not the only things that we look for. For example, you have logic bugs. What I mean for logic bugs, for example, you have an online bet system, or online casino, and you can find ways to always win. That is very often some bugs that we found. A combination of bets, a combination of games that allows you to win always. So this is a logic bug. Not automatic tool will protect against this kind of bugs, because you cannot detect it only by doing the mathematical calculations. So the most common bugs are permission mistakes. Basically, just hackers just come and steal the money because you failed to set up the adequate permissions. That is a very common bug, because there are so many smart contracts usually have so many different users, so many different resources. It's very easy to make the mistake and give a permission to some user that you shouldn't have it. Market manipulation, of course, you know that is a very hard bug to detect, especially manipulation of oracles. That's basically, even if it doesn't seem like something that you can be hacked, it's actually very easy to do, especially if you have a degree in economy, and it's very hard to detect from the source code. And I have to talk about cryptography, not crypto, but actually cryptographic algorithms. The thing about cryptographic algorithms is that there are many ways to implement it, but only one way is the correct. So if you don't know exactly how to implement it correctly, you very likely made a mistake, and a very costly mistake, because if you fail cryptography, you have, again, a critical bug, because most likely you will get all the money, or you will give control of your project to a hacker. Finally, you have centralization, that is basically about trust. The more centralized is a system, the more trust it needs. I mean, you have to trust the one to have the control. This is about rug pulls. It's very easy to do a rug pull if you have centralization or hidden centralization. Sometimes a project seems decentralized, but it's actually centralized in some points, and there are vulnerable points that you have to detect them and document it in an audit.
This would include stuff like 51% attacks, chain reorgs, and other fun stuff like that. That's a problem. That's all grouped under centralization.
Exactly. It's very hard to detect bugs, but you will detect when you got a rug pull or in the audit. So it's better detecting the audit. So this is also very important, because the vulnerability that Mark just showed you, it doesn't happen in the smart contract. It's in the front end. And most audits are focused in the smart contract part. For example, in the stack, it showed the Clarity is a very safe smart contract language focused on security. But this doesn't help, because the vulnerability was not in the smart contract, was not in the back end, that is a database. It was not in the blockchain. It wasn't the front end. It wasn't the website. So when you audit, you have to look at absolutely everything, every part of the project. If some money vendor will say, about Bitcoin is a safe technology. It's impossible to hack, but that is true. So the smart contract is very safe. You cannot hack. Well, but you have a lot of technology in this side. You have websites. You have how many libraries JavaScript libraries your website use. Well, you have to take a look at everything, because as Mark just showed, you can steal all the money and don't even touch the smart contract. So it's very important to do an analysis of every part of the project. And also, if your project is too big, for example, you have gigabytes, a huge project, you don't have to get scared. The audit won't take 1 year or multiple years, because you have to identify the surface of attack. Surface of attack is what part of your project is vulnerable, is exposed to the users, is exposed to the hackers. Not every part of the project is exposed, only usually a very small part. So that's why when you do an audit, it doesn't take forever usually. It only takes, and you don't have to analyze the complete project, only the surface of attack. But it's very important to detect what is that surface of attack. Okay, so we are talking about audits, about code audits, but what else you can do to improve security of your project? Well, there are plenty of things that you can do. For example, penetration testing, that is the most very common thing to do. That is focused not in the code, but also in the resource, in the infrastructure of your project. For example, the cloud infrastructure. Basically, you pay a hacker to steal your passwords, to do social engineering, to analyze your Wi-Fi passwords, your infrastructure. Basically, they try to get into your network before the hacker does it. But it's not a code review, it's basically a penetration testing. Try to penetrate into your system. Of course, it will fix all the ways that you have misconfigurations. But you have bug bounties. That is basically an audit. When you offer a bounty for any hacker to discover a vulnerability, you pay them before, I don't know, the mafia patent, basically. Actually, it's very useful. It's not the same as an audit because it's not so comprehensive. But it's actually useful to participate because it catches plenty of bugs, maybe some critical bugs, but mostly are not critical bugs. But it's very useful as an organization to have that option. But I see it more like an additional to an audit because it doesn't focus in a lot of stuff that the audit does.
And bug bounty programs are really fun because you interact with freelancers. Every freelancer has their own specialty that may not be, I guess, kept in a more professional company or something like that. So there's always these little edge cases that freelancers can find and get paid for, and that also helps engagement and adoption of your own project, a little bit more security monitoring of the same. So,
yeah, this is very useful. Then we have vulnerability scanners. I mean, you have software that actually is like an automatic auditor. It looks at your code and tries to find vulnerabilities. Some are very good, mostly are not very good. But the thing is that you should be using because it's basically for free. So you get security for free. You have to use them. It's not a replacement for an audit because, of course, like every automatic vulnerability scanner has false positive, false negative. It doesn't catch all the bugs. It catches bugs that are not real. But it's very useful as a developer to integrate these scanners into your developer queue. I mean, before you ever do a release, you do a little scan to see if you made a mistake. It's basically for free, so it's very, very useful to you to do it. And something important, some very important stuff also is training, because when you're a developer, it's better to already know where not to make the mistakes before you do it. So it's very important to invest, if you are a manager, to invest in training your employees, your developers. And if you're a developer, you will have much more value for yourself, for your career, if you know security coding practice. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do a project, but only a couple ways to do it safe, to do it secure. So it's very easy. It's very important to know which ways you can code to avoid most vulnerabilities, and you will get a much more value for your career, and you can earn more money, of course, because you're more trained. So the next thing that's very important is incident response planning. This basically Mark is very involved here. That is very important, I mean, because in your project, you will get attacked. No matter how many security you do, there is always the possibility that you will get hacked sometimes. And the important thing is what will you do in that? You have to have a plan. You cannot panic. You cannot close your network. You cannot start reading tweets without order. No, you have to have a plan. And that plan is the incident response planning. You have to know exactly what you do. You have to be a contact. You have to be a plan, which part of the project you can shut down, the communication, even legal advice. That's very important to have in place before things happen, because on the fly it's very hard to do it. And lastly, monitoring. Monitoring is basically the old antivirus. You know, the antivirus is basically a monitoring tool for your computer. Well, you can do very similar tools for your network or for your project. You have logs. You have tools that automatically monitor and try to detect incidents before they happen. There are several. Basically, it's about software tools that do the monitoring for you. You don't have to do it yourself. But it's very important to have it, especially when an incident happens. You will catch it in monitoring first. And the important thing is to decrease the security debt. I don't know if you know about technical debt. Technical debt is when you fail to upgrade your system, and it seems that it doesn't affect you until it affects you. Well, security is the same. If you don't fix the security, your project will work anyway. But you got to see like a debt that you have. And in some moment, you have to pay that debt. And that debt you pay by your project being hacked. So it's better to invest in security before, and try to decrease that security debt as much as possible.
And it's definitely important to keep in mind that you should be doing more than one of these at a time. If you just do a pen test, that doesn't automatically make you secure at all. You should be considering a pen test plus a bug bounty program, along with your IR planning. You have to have multiple layers of security to minimize the attack surface that any bad guy will be trying to exploit.
Exactly. It's security in depth. That is, once you have multiple layer security, it's much better than you have only a single one.
Exactly.
Speaking of that, so as a user, how do you know if software is safe, if software is secure? How do you measure that? But it's very hard to do. That's why in the banking industry, you have certifications, or you have certification for software, but you don't have yet for blockchain. So what do you do? Well, you have to look at the developers and the leadership, how much experience they have. The new, an experienced developer usually have less bugs because it's more experience, of course. How much the audit of the project there are. Like Mark just said, it's not a single audit. Because if a project do a single audit 2 years ago, basically it's useless because the project changes so much in 2 years that basically it's really not very useful. You have to look for several audits, periodic audits, and especially if the code that is currently in the blockchain has been audited. Because many times it's happened that you audit a code, change some lines, and re-upload the code to the blockchain. And if that's little lines of the code that wasn't audited, there is a bug. And I see it happens in a lot of projects, and they lost a lot of money for that. So it's very important that you have several audits from very experienced auditing teams, and even from different teams. Because usually different auditing teams are expert in different kind of vulnerabilities. So it's very good to you. It's not very good for an auditing team, but you should have different auditing team auditing your code. So you will catch the maximum amount of vulnerabilities.
It's usually considered best practice to have an audit at least once a year. Some very, very security-conscious people will do every 4 to 6 months, but at minimum, at least once a year, you want to see an audit published. And more importantly, you want to see the vulnerabilities fixed. Having an audit that just lists a bunch of vulnerabilities that the devs don't do anything with helps absolutely no one. It only helps the black hats end up exploiting the project. So make sure that not only that you have an annual audit, but the audit is shown as the issues are resolved or fixed.
Exactly. Audits are usually public. I mean, you went on site, you can look which kind of audit they have, you can download, you can read them, and you can see if the vulnerabilities are fixed, because the audit, basically at the end, it always says, is the vulnerability reported were fixed, or were not fixed, or were accepted, or they are like that. So basically, you have to do it yourself, because there's no certification yet, so that's some tasks you have to do. A due diligence that you have to do, but you're going to use a project and you can invest a lot of money in that project. It's very good that you have at least somebody that do it for you or do it yourself. And I think that's it.
Yeah. So thank you guys all for your time. You only have about a minute and a half, so I don't think we have too much time for questions, but we'll be floating around somewhere here. And of course, feel free to reach out to us at any point. And thank you all for your time. All right.